John Gottman, who is a guru, right? He's the man responsible for a gigantic amount of the actual research that has been done on relationships over the past 40 years. And one of the things Gottman talks about is what he calls the good enough marriage or the good enough relationship. I'll be using the word marriage here because it's the word Gottman uses, but here I'm talking about relationships. So Gottman talks about the good enough relationship, and what he's trying to explain to us is that he's trying to get us to be reasonable about our expectations for our relationship. Dr. Gottman, correctly points out not every relationship is going to be this completely incredible over the moon thing where partners are just, close friends and they're always pursuing deeper levels of intimacy and connection and just really making the marriage something that they're specifically working on day after day after day. And that was intriguing to me because before I'd read that, I kind of always thought, well, people who come in for couples counseling, they want, these fantastic relationships. And yeah, a lot of times that's true. And then I thought about physical fitness. Okay, and I realized, look, there's really a small number of people in the world who are going to spend their lives at the gym, right? And that their entire life is going to revolve around getting bigger muscles, right? And one day it's leg day and the next day it's, back and lats or whatever, right? Even most people who are basically interested in fitness, that's not going to be like one of the most important factors in their life, even if they're trying to prioritize basic fitness on a regular basis. And then I sort of realized, that's the way some people I think are probably going to approach relationships and marriage as well. There's going to be that group of people that are saying, look, the most important thing in life is your intimate relationship, and it deserves to be absolutely prioritized, made number one, and we should be working at it constantly, daily, whether that means going to therapy or having daily conversations about how things are going or whatever, right? Just making it a huge focus and really feeling like, their mission in life is really to get closer and closer and closer to each other. I love that. I think that's awesome, and I'm going to talk to you about why that is in a minute. I find that really an attractive idea. But just like I said, most people aren't going to be gym rats when it comes to physical fitness. And so, it makes sense to me that when it comes to your intimate relationship, some people are going to just be like, sort of relationship gym rats, right? This wanting to constantly pour in and go to marriage conferences and all that and make it better and better and better and better. But probably a lot of people are like, what? We just want to have a relationship where we're not at each other's throats, where both of us feel reasonably safe around the other person, where neither one of us is feeling constantly put down or criticized, invalidated, that kind of thing. And for a lot of people, they're probably going to be like, what, that's cool. I just want to be able to live with my partner in relative peace and know who I'm going to be going out with on the weekends, and we can enjoy our lives together. And I think that makes sense, right? Like I said, a lot there's only a minority of people that are going to strive for like the absolute best in like any given area. But here's the thing, and here's the reason why I'm recording this today, because I got to thinking about Gottman's concept of the good enough marriage, and I realized, I don't think that I'm necessarily a good enough marriage counselor. And what I mean by that isn't that I'm not a good enough counselor. It means I want to work with couples who want more than a good enough marriage. And by the way, that's not a judgment, right? That's not a judgment on couples who say, Yeah, we just want to live together in relative peace. I totally get that, right? That makes, you know, reasonable sense to me. But it's just the way that I'm made up as a person, as a counselor. I love writing. And, you know, if I decided, hey, I'm going to start offering writing classes on the internet, I would not market that by saying, hey, you know, if you want to be a halfway decent writer, if you want your friends to make fun of you less for the way you write, you know, in your Facebook posts or whatever, come see me. I'm your guy, right? It's just I would market it by saying, you know what, if you want to stand out as a writer, if you want to write better than anyone or almost anyone you know, if you want to truly pursue excellence as a writer, you know, look me up. Come see me. I'm your guy, right? Um, I never wanted to be a good enough therapist. And by the way, I think you know, there are definitely people who say, you know what, work isn't going to be my calling, my passion. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to earn a paycheck. I'm going to do a decent job, do a good job while I'm at work. But my life is going to be invested in my family, right? And that's fine. Again, not everybody has to say, you know, I need to be or want to be the absolute cream of the crop in what I do. But I do. Okay, it's just that's the way I am for some reason, and I don't think it's morally or like, you know, I don't think it's morally better or anything. It's just there's something that's in me that just drives me to do that. So I got to thinking about this idea of good enough marriages, and I realized, you know, if a couple comes to me and they're struggling, you know, not every couple even has the potential to have, you know, an outstanding, super deep, close connected relationship, because it's not just up to either individual, right? I mean, you may want that in your relationship, but maybe your partner doesn't want it as much as you. And if they don't, there's going to be a natural limit in how close your relationship is ever going to be. But what are you supposed to do if you're in that situation, right? Do you just go, oh, well, I can't have the super close, intimate relationship I want, so I'm just going to leave my partner? I mean, I know some people think that way, but I think relationships are precious, right? I believe they're worth working on, they're worth preserving, and generally they're worth saving. So if you're in a relationship and you want, you know, a way better than just good enough relationship and your partner doesn't, I just want to tell you that, right, that may be frustrating for you. I get that, right? But I also want to tell you that since relationships are precious, there is no shame in saying, you know what, then we're going to have the best marriage we can. And that marriage may end up being a good enough marriage, a good enough relationship, right? So here I am on the one hand saying, I think that I'm just wired to be a therapist who wants to work with people to have the best of whatever it is that I'm helping. So if I'm working with relationships, right, I want to help people have the absolute best relationships they can, right? I want to help them be as close to each other and as connected as possible. On the other hand, if you look down in the, I don't know if what you call it, the resources section or the description underneath this video, there's a link that is there for a podcast that I heard on an excellent podcast called Hidden Brain. It's on NPR, and it's a psychological podcast where they study a bunch of, you know, cool topics in psychology. And the episode that I've linked to is one where there's a relationship expert there who's talking. He doesn't use the term good enough marriage, but basically the idea of the episode is, you know what? Sometimes if you're unhappy in your relationship, I mean, yeah, one thing you can do is go to therapy and try and make the relationship better. But another thing you can do is lower your expectations. Okay? I mean, that's not meant to sound cynical. Right? I mean, if you think that your relationship with your partner is supposed to meet all of your needs for connection and companionship in life, you're going to be disappointed, right? You're constantly going to be hurting and frustrated with your partner, because it's not possible that that can happen, right? So that's a good example of how lowering your expectations can really increase your level of happiness and contentment and satisfaction in your relationship. So that's one really good example. And so the general idea that this guy in the podcast is trying to communicate is that, if you've been in a relationship for a while and you want a relationship that's on a certain level of connectedness, but your partner doesn't really seem to want the same thing, that it's really okay to say, you know what we have is precious. What we have is valuable. What we have is worth preserving. And there probably are other ways of getting some of those other needs for connection and companionship met, right? That are legitimate and that, right, can help sort of fill some of that gap in for you. Okay. So what's the core message I'm giving here, right? I'm kind of vacillating, right? On the one hand, I'm going, hey, Gottman talks about the good enough marriage and says, hey, it's fine if that's what you aspire to. You want a good enough relationship where you can be comfortable. Okay. On the other hand, I'm saying I'm really driven, right, to try and help people achieve higher and higher levels of intimacy and connection. And then I'm circling back again and saying, oh, but there's this podcast that says, hey, lowering your expectations can really be a good way of increasing your level of satisfaction in your relationship. So here's the way I want to wrap this up. What I'm really saying is that you need to know what kind of relationship, number one, you want, right? You need to know what is it that you want out of your relationship. But the second part of that that's just as important is you need to clearly understand or be realistic with yourself about whether or not that's what your partner wants. Because if you want something way more close, vulnerable, and connected than your partner does, there's a good chance that's not going to happen, that's not going to be within reach for you. Not because of any insufficiency or inadequacy in you, but because it's a two-way street, right? Like, if you want that level of intimacy and connection, your partner has to be on board with that. And you know what? If that's what you want and your partner isn't on board, I guess the reason I'm recording this is to say the good enough marriage is good enough, right? It's good to look at your relationship, like I said, and say, this is worth preserving. What we have is valuable, and then to find other ways that you can get some of those other needs met. Now, I'm not indicating in any way that, you should let your partner completely off the hook to meet any of your needs. Clearly, I'm not saying that, right? But I am saying that, your partner may only want to connect emotionally up to a certain point. And if that's the case for you, look at what your choices are. Live in the marriage chronically frustrated, leave the relationship, or find other ways to get some of those needs met, right, through other types of connections and relationships. Those are really the three options available to you. And I'm a pro-marriage counselor, right? Generally, I think relationships are worth preserving. I know I've said that several times. So that's the important thing, right? Regardless of what kind of relationship you want, that type of relationship may or may not be a possibility for you. But you know what? If it's not, rather than you're just constantly being dissatisfied and frustrated and feeling like you're missing the mark, maybe it's okay. I'm saying it is okay just to look at what you do have and say, this is precious, this is valuable. And, I want to protect and preserve this in my life. Do you want to leave? That's an option, right? It is an option. But, then you may end up in a situation where you find out that it's similar to the one you just came out of, right? Generally, I think it's good that we try and bloom where we're planted. Now, there are clearly exceptions to that, right? So I guess that's what I'm saying, right? Is for you to know what it is you want, to be realistic about what is possible for you, and then for you to feel really okay, right? If you have friends that have these stellar, intimate, close connections, it's really okay if that's not what your partner wants, or even if that's not what you want, okay? And to take whatever you have and make it something that you can be satisfied with. That's the most important thing. And then the last part of this for me is that I'm just identifying more and more, realizing that as a therapist, as a counselor, it's just in my nature to want to try to help people connect at the deepest possible levels. And so I'll help couples connect wherever they want to, wherever they can. But couples who really want to go for those extra levels of connection and intimacy, I think would find me to be a therapist who's particularly cut out for that. That's just kind of in my nature. So that's what I wanted to address with you today. Is basically the idea, is a good enough marriage good enough? And I want to say to you, generally, yeah, I think the good enough marriage is good enough. And I want to encourage you to be able to settle in and be more content where you are, right? And that there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think there's a lot of good to be said about it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to remind you about the link that is at the bottom of this, where I have that podcast. I would really encourage everyone watching this to check out the podcast. It has some really good, I don't necessarily agree with every single thing in it, but I think it has just some outstanding content about what our expectations are for relationships and how that relates directly to our level of satisfaction and happiness, right? So I want to encourage that. As usual, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you subscribe, that would be amazing. I'm at DF Couples Teletherapy, DF Couples Teletherapy on Facebook and on Instagram. My website and blog are at davidflowerstherapy.com. If you check out some of that, connect in with me, that'd be awesome. And above all, help me get the word out to as many people as possible that this resource is available for them. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this helpful for you today. If you have any questions, I want to encourage you to always feel free to email me, ask me to explore stuff further, either in another video or on a future blog post or on Facebook or Instagram. I would love to really get those kind of notes and be able to do more of what you guys are wanting me to do. Okay? Thank you again so much, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.